Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep pulling you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. In 2020, I was 24 and living in Akron, Ohio, in this old brick fourplex building near the University District. My unit was on the top floor, a one-bedroom that creaked every time I walked from the kitchen to the living room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it felt like a fresh start after leaving a long relationship behind. That's when I met Calder. We met through a mutual acquaintance at a friend's house party. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he had this presence that pulled you in. Tall, sharp jawline, quiet voice that forced you to lean in a little to hear him. When he smiled, it felt like he was letting you in on some private joke. That night, we exchanged numbers, and by the next morning he was already texting me. Things escalated fast, too fast. By the third week, Calder was showing up with groceries for me, insisting on cooking dinner. By the fifth week, he had clothes folded neatly in my dresser. By the second month, there was a spare key to my place on his key ring, even though I never remembered giving it to him. At first, I told myself this was what a real relationship was supposed to look like. A man who wanted to commit, who wanted to be present. But there were cracks I didn't want to see. He texted constantly. Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you answering? If I went more than 20 minutes without responding, he'd fire off a second text. Don't forget me. It started as something I laughed at. Cute even, but it shifted quickly into something that felt less like love and more like surveillance. One night, I fell asleep on the couch after grading some work emails. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of whispering. Groggy, I sat up and realized Calder was in the recliner across from me, just sitting there in the dark. His elbows on his knees, hands folded, staring right at me. He wasn't on his phone. The TV wasn't on. He was whispering my name over and over, rhythmically, like a chant. Calder, I croaked, voice shaky. What are you doing? He smiled faintly. I just like watching you sleep. I wanted to believe it was weirdly romantic, some creepy joke, but something about the way his eyes didn't leave mine made my chest tighten. It didn't feel like love. It felt like ownership. The following week, I noticed small things out of place. My phone charger moved from the kitchen outlet to my nightstand. A pair of earrings I hadn't worn in months suddenly sitting on the bathroom sink. On the mirror, faint smears, letters traced in the condensation after my shower. Words like mine and forever. I tried to laugh it off, told Calder about it, hoping he'd say he was messing around. Instead, his face went flat, almost offended. Why would you think that's me? He asked. His voice had an edge to it I hadn't heard before. That night, I couldn't shake the unease. Around midnight, I went into my bedroom and found a small Polaroid picture on my pillow. It was me, asleep, my hair spread out across the couch cushion, mouth slightly open. I hadn't taken it. When I demanded to know where it came from, Calder just shrugged. You're beautiful when you're sleeping, he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I felt my stomach drop, but I still tried to rationalize, tried to convince myself it was just clingy boyfriend behavior, nothing sinister. People have quirks, right? The breaking point for me was the night I came home late from grabbing drinks with coworkers. I didn't invite Calder, and he hadn't texted me much that day, so I figured he was busy. But when I unlocked my door, the apartment was lit up with candles. Not just one or two, dozens. They lined the dresser, the windowsill, the floor around my bed, and in the middle of the bed was a sheet of paper. It was a screenshot from my Instagram, printed out on computer paper, a photo I'd posted months ago. Across it, in thick black marker, he had written, "You don't need anyone but me." I froze in the doorway, my chest so tight I couldn't breathe. Then from the closet, Calder stepped out, calm, smiling. like this was all some elaborate romantic gesture. "You scared me," he said, like I was the one intruding. I wanted it to be a surprise. My whole body was screaming at me to run. Instead, I forced my voice to stay steady. "You need to leave, Calder. Right now." But he didn't leave. He sat down on the edge of the bed, ran his fingers across the blanket like he was making himself comfortable, and said, "This is my home too now." The way he said it, slow and certain, made it clear he actually believed it. That night I locked my bedroom door and slept on the floor by it, keys clutched in my hand, staring at the flicker of candlelight under the crack. And I swore I heard him pacing the hallway outside, whispering my name again and again. The next morning, Calder acted like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the forehead while I was still half asleep on the bedroom floor, and asked if I wanted him to pick up breakfast sandwiches. It was so casual, like the night of candles and printed photos had been wiped clean from his memory. I told him no, I needed space. He frowned, but didn't argue. He just left. I remember sitting at my kitchen table for hours after that, staring at the door, wondering if he was really gone. I thought about calling a friend, but what would I say? "Hey, my boyfriend decorated my room with candles and pictures of me, and then slept in my closet." I knew how insane it sounded, but that didn't make it any less real. For the next few days, Calder didn't text much, and when he did, the tone was different, shorter, sharper. One message just said, "You're mine, remember that." Another, "Stop making me worry." One night I was lying in bed scrolling my phone when I heard it again. The faint whisper, my name, drawn out, almost sing-song, floating through the apartment. At first I thought it was in my head, until I heard it again, closer this time, from inside the walls. I sat up, staring at the closet door. My chest tightened. I forced myself out of bed, every step heavier than the last, until I slid the closet door open. Nothing. Just my clothes hanging stiffly in the stale air. I pulled them aside, and that's when I noticed it. A hole in the drywall behind my shoe rack. Not big, but big enough for someone to reach through. Big enough to watch from. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. My heart was racing so hard it felt like it might explode. Before I could even process what to do, my phone lit up on the nightstand. A text. From Calder. "I love watching you when you don't know I'm there." I dropped the phone. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He was here, somewhere in the apartment. I bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Deadbolt was unlocked, chain off, but the door felt jammed like someone was holding it from the other side. Panic surged through me. I spun around, eyes scanning the room, and that's when I heard it. His voice. "I told you this is my home too." It was coming from under the bed. I dropped to the floor without meaning to, my body just collapsing. I saw his eyes first, glinting in the darkness, inches from mine. He was curled under there, smiling, holding something long and metallic in his hand. A kitchen knife. I screamed, shoved myself backward, and he slid out fast, almost animalistic, grabbing my ankle. I kicked, hard, catching his jaw just enough to make him grunt and let go. I didn't think. I ran. Into the kitchen, through the narrow hallway, slamming doors behind me. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, sobbing into the receiver as I tried to wedge a chair under the back door handle. Calder's footsteps were steady. No rush, no panic. Like he knew every inch of the apartment, every weak spot in the floorboards. He started laughing. Low, calm. "You're making this harder than it has to be?" The dispatcher on the line told me to stay on, stay quiet. Help was on the way. I crouched in the corner, clutching the phone, when I heard the scrape of metal against the door. Calder was dragging the knife across it, testing it. Then he whispered, almost sweetly, "We could have been perfect." By the time the police arrived, the back door was half splintered. I ran out to them sobbing, pointing inside, but Calder was gone. Just gone. No sign of him. No knife. Not even his shoes. The officers searched the apartment, and that's when they found it. Behind the closet wall, there was a crawl space. Narrow, dusty, lined with blankets and empty food wrappers. And scattered across the floor were photos of me, screenshots from my Instagram, candids I never even knew he took, pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me eating, even one of me in the shower through the crack in the bathroom door. He'd been living in the walls, watching me, not just when he was invited, but all the time. I moved out that same week, left almost everything behind. I changed my number, blocked him everywhere. To this day, I don't know where Calder went. He never tried to contact me again. But sometimes, late at night in my new place, I'll wake up to that same sound, whispering my name, like he found me again. When I agreed to move in with my boyfriend Marek, I thought I was stepping into stability. He owned this old 2-story farmhouse just outside Madison, Wisconsin, the kind of place with peeling white paint, a porch swing that creaked in the wind, and fields stretching out for miles behind it. It felt private, quiet, safe. At least that's what I told myself. From the beginning, Marek had one rule: don't go in the basement. He said it so casually the first time I asked. Something about old wiring and unsafe stairs. But the way his eyes held mine a beat too long made me swallow my curiosity and nod. Everyone has quirks, right? If that was his, I could live with it. Except the basement didn't stay silent. The first time I noticed, it was almost 2 a.m. I woke to this low vibration in the floorboards like a subwoofer pressed against the house. At first I thought it was the wind rattling through the fields, but when I pressed my ear to the hardwood I could hear it clearly. Voices. Not one, but many. Chanting in unison. The rhythm was strange, rising and falling like waves, in a language I couldn't recognize. I sat frozen in bed, straining to catch the words, but they were swallowed by the old vents. Then the sound stopped all at once like a switch had been flipped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the chanting itself. The next morning I asked Marek about it. He didn't laugh or brush it off like I expected. He just said, "Pipes, this place is old. You'll get used to it." But the way his knuckles whitened around his coffee mug made it clear he knew exactly what I'd heard. After that, I couldn't stop noticing things. Some mornings there'd be a faint smoky smell drifting up from the vents, like burned wood and iron. Once, while folding laundry, I found flecks of what looked like ash clinging to Marek's jeans. He said it was just dirt from a job site, but when I picked up the fabric, my fingertips came away black and oily. Then there was the night I came home early from a shift at the hospital. Marek's truck was already in the driveway, though he hadn't mentioned being off work. The house was dark except for a faint reddish glow spilling out from under the basement door. When I stepped closer, I swore I heard humming. Not like a tune, more like a drone layered with voices. I held my breath, crouched low, and tried the knob. Locked, of course. I knelt down, pressed my eye against the tiny crack where the door didn't quite meet the frame, and for a split second I saw it, the flicker of a candle flame, then a shadow passing across it. Before I could process it, the glow vanished. The humming stopped. The air grew still, so still it felt like the house itself was listening. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and went back to the kitchen pretending I hadn't seen anything. A few minutes later, Marek walked in from outside, his boots muddy, shirt collar damp with sweat. "You're home early," he said, not smiling. His voice was low, measured. I nodded, forcing a laugh, and lied that I was just tired. He didn't press it, but the way he looked at me, searching, suspicious, made me feel smaller than I'd ever felt in my own skin. The next week, things escalated. Marek invited some of his friends over. I had never met them, and the moment they stepped into the house, I knew I didn't want to. They were all men, older than him, dressed too neatly for just hanging out. No one brought beer, no one joked. They shook my hand with stiff, clammy fingers, their eyes flat and unblinking. One of them held my hand too long, like he was testing how much I would squirm. After dinner, Marek told me to head upstairs, said they had business to discuss. I lay in bed, heart racing, listening. The basement door creaked open. Footsteps descended, one after another, slow and deliberate. Then came the voices. This time, the chanting was louder, reverberating through the floorboards, each syllable striking like a drumbeat against my chest. I pressed my phone against the vent and hit record. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The chanting built, overlapping, a dozen voices rising together. Then suddenly, a scream ripped through the air, high-pitched, desperate, cut off mid-breath. I clamped my hand over my mouth, tears springing to my eyes. The scream echoed in my skull, proof I wasn't imagining things. Then, silence. And in that silence, Marek's voice. Calm, steady, almost conversational. Go back to bed. It wasn't a shout, it wasn't even loud, but it came through the vent like he was standing right beside me. I dropped the phone, staring at the dark vent like any second his face might appear through it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The morning after that scream, I couldn't look at Marek the same way. He made eggs and toast like nothing had happened, humming softly under his breath while I sat at the kitchen table staring at him. Every time he caught my eye, I flinched. I wanted to ask him what was in the basement, who screamed, why his friends came over late at night dressed like they were going to a funeral. But my throat stayed tight. Some instinct told me that asking wouldn't get me answers. It would get me hurt. So I played along. I laughed at his jokes, kissed his cheek, went to work like normal. But inside I was unraveling. Over the next week, the noises didn't stop. If anything, they grew stronger. Chanting at least twice a week, sometimes every other night, and always at the same hour, between midnight and 2. I started staying up, pressing my phone to the vents, recording what I could. But the moment I hit playback, there was nothing. Just static. One night after Marek left to pick up supplies, I searched the house top to bottom. He carried that basement key on his chain like it was welded there, but I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd left a spare. In the hall closet, shoved behind a box of paint cans, I found a heavy canvas bag. Inside were candles, a knife with a bone handle and a small animal skull. I almost dropped it. My stomach churned so hard I thought I'd throw up right there on the floor. I shoved the bag back where I found it and tried to calm my breathing, but my ears picked up something else. A faint sound from the basement. Not chanting this time. Not humming. Crying. A woman's voice. Weak. Hoarse. Calling out. I pressed my face against the crack in the door, my whole body trembling. I wanted to scream for her, but before I could, I heard footsteps behind me. Mia, Marek's voice said softly. I spun, nearly falling. He was standing at the end of the hall, muddy boots, dirt on his hands, eyes locked on me. You're not supposed to be here, he said, but his tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed, almost sad. I stammered something about hearing a noise, but he just walked past me, unlocked the basement door with the key around his neck and stepped inside. He glanced back once and said, "Stay upstairs." Then the door shut. That was the longest night of my life. I sat on the bed fully clothed, shoes on, car keys in my pocket, staring at the vent until the first hint of dawn crept across the floor. The next evening I made up my mind I was leaving. I waited until Marek left, then grabbed what I could carry. But when I went to the front door, the chain lock had been replaced, reinforced. The screws were drilled so deep into the wood I couldn't pry them out. The back door had a brand new bolt. Even the windows, nailed shut from the outside. My chest seized with panic. He had trapped me. And then, the basement door creaked open. I froze. My whole body went cold as I turned my head. Marek was standing in the doorway holding a candle. Behind him I saw shadows, figures moving in the flickering light. "It's time you understood," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're part of this now." Before I could run, two men stepped up from the basement, the same friends who had come to dinner. They flanked Marek like guards. He held out his hand to me. I backed away, shaking my head, whispering no over and over. "You've been chosen," he said. "You should be honored." The men advanced. I bolted for the stairs, but they were faster. One grabbed my wrist so hard I thought the bone would snap. I screamed, kicked, fought, but it didn't matter. They dragged me toward that basement door while Marek just stood there, calm, watching. The last thing I remember clearly was the smell. Thick smoke and iron, sharp enough to burn my throat. And the chanting rising again, louder than ever as they pulled me down into the dark. When I woke up, it was morning. I was lying in my own bed, the curtains open, sunlight spilling across the sheets. Marek was gone. No sign of his friends. No sign of anything. If it weren't for the bruises on my wrists and the ash smeared across my arms, I might have convinced myself it was just a nightmare. I packed a bag that same hour, broke a window with a chair, and climbed out. I left the farmhouse and never went back. I reported everything I could to the police, but when they searched the house, the basement was empty. No candles, no tools, no signs of anyone else ever being there. They told me there wasn't enough to pursue. That was 2 years ago. I don't know where Marek went. His truck vanished from the driveway. His phone disconnected. His entire life erased like he'd never existed. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I swear I hear it again. A low hum, faint through the vents. A chorus of voices rising and falling, just waiting for me to listen. I met Cassian through a coworker when I first moved to Chicago. He wasn't the type I usually went for. Quiet, reserved, a little too intense. But he had this magnetic intelligence that made you lean in when he spoke. He worked as a neuroscience researcher at a private clinic, and the way he talked about the brain was like listening to someone describe a galaxy. Big, endless, mysterious. On our first date, he told me he hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since college. He said it like a confession, but then laughed about it, claiming he preferred to study sleep more than experience it. I thought it was quirky, maybe even admirable. A man so committed to his work, he sacrificed rest. A few months later, we were official. By then, I knew Cassian had one obsession: the mechanics of dreaming. He was convinced the subconscious wasn't random but a map. Something you could chart, control, even weaponize. I didn't really get it, but the passion in his eyes when he spoke was intoxicating. At first, it was just little things. He bought me a smartwatch that tracked my sleep cycles. "For fun," he said. Then he set up an app on my phone that synced with his, so he could see my nightly data. When I laughed and asked if he was keeping tabs on me, he smiled and kissed my forehead. "I just want to understand you better," he whispered. The escalation was subtle. I'd fall asleep at his apartment and wake up with small adhesive patches on my temples, wires trailing to his laptop. Once I found sticky residue on my skin where electrodes had been. He always apologized if I noticed, promising it was harmless. "You're helping me more than you know," he said once, holding my hand with this reverence that almost made me believe him. But then the dreams started changing. I'd always been a light dreamer, vague fragments I could barely remember. But now my nights were filled with suffocating visions. I dreamed of being strapped into a chair while shadows whispered numbers in my ears. I dreamed of drowning in thick black liquid while Cassian stood calmly on the shore scribbling notes. In one dream, I opened my eyes and saw him leaning over me. Not dream Cassian, but real Cassian, adjusting something on my forehead while I couldn't move. I woke gasping, my chest aching, but when I told him, his expression wasn't concern. It was fascination. "That's incredible," he murmured, like I'd given him a gift. "Can you remember the sequence?" The shapes? Anything? His eagerness made my skin crawl. One night I woke to find him standing over me, holding a syringe, my voice caught in my throat. He smiled gently, like it was nothing. "Just melatonin," he said. "Helps regulate cycles. You trust me, don't you?" My body screamed no, but before I could protest, the needle slid into my arm. Cold liquid rushed under my skin, and the world dissolved. When I opened my eyes again, it wasn't morning. The curtains were still drawn, the room dim. My head throbbed, my mouth dry, and when I tried to sit up, I realized I couldn't. My wrists were strapped to the bed frame with soft leather cuffs, my ankles bound loosely, but firmly enough to keep me still. Cassian sat in the corner, the glow of his laptop painting his face blue. He didn't look at me right away, just typed furiously, nodding to himself. Then he glanced up, smiling like a teacher catching a student awake in class. "You moved too much last time," he said softly. "This is just to make sure the data stays clean." I yanked at the restraints, panic flooding my chest. My voice came out cracked. "Cassian, let me go. This isn't okay." But he only tilted his head, eyes shining with something I'd never seen before. Not tenderness, not love, devotion, and I realized it wasn't directed at me. It was directed at the experiment. I pulled against the restraints until the leather burned my wrists. My voice cracked as I begged him to stop, but Cassian only watched, his expression calm, almost pitying. "You're scared because you don't understand," he said gently. "But you will. I promise you'll thank me someday." He stood, moving toward me with that same syringe from before. This one wasn't labeled. The liquid inside shimmered faintly in the dim light like oil in water. I shook my head violently, twisting, but he held my arm down with one hand and slid the needle into my vein with the other. The sting was sharp, but the wave that followed was worse. My whole body felt heavy, sinking into the mattress, but my mind was awake. Too awake. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was trapped in my own body, my chest heaving while Cassian's face hovered over mine, blurred at the edges. "There it is," he whispered, watching my pupils dilate. "Perfect. You're between states now, conscious and unconscious at once. Exactly where I need you." He pulled a rolling cart closer to the bed, covered in equipment I didn't recognize. Wires, adhesive pads, a headset lined with tiny needles. He fixed the pads to my temples, my chest, my arms, murmuring measurements under his breath. Every touch made me want to scream, but the drug kept me silent, paralyzed. "You have no idea what you're capable of," he said softly. "Your dreams are doorways, and with the right push, I can open them. I can see what you see." He slid the headset onto my skull, the needles pressing against my skin. My vision went white for a moment, then fractured into jagged colors. My heart hammered as the room tilted and warped. Suddenly, I wasn't in the bedroom anymore. I was standing in a long hallway, endless and dark, the sound of Cassian's typing echoing behind me. I looked down and realized I wasn't really standing. My body was still in the bed. I could feel the restraints, but another part of me was here. In this dream he had forced open, and I wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the dark. Not people, not fully. Their outlines flickered, stretched too long, bending in ways that hurt to look at. They whispered in unison, voices like static crackling through a broken speaker. Cassian's voice cut through, calm and measured. "Don't fight them. Let them see you." I screamed inside my own head, pulling away, but the shadows pressed closer. One leaned down, and though its face was nothing but shifting static, I felt its breath against my cheek. It whispered my name, over and over. I ripped myself back with every ounce of will, and suddenly I was in the bed again, sobbing through clenched teeth. Cassian was smiling, eyes bright. "You crossed over," he said, almost giddy. "You're stronger than I thought." He leaned down, kissed my forehead like it was the most intimate, loving moment in the world, then whispered, "We'll go deeper tomorrow." The drug wore off hours later. My wrists ached, my skin was raw, and Cassian was asleep on the couch across the room, laptop still open on his chest. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw him clearly. Not as a boyfriend, not as a protector, but as a scientist who saw me as nothing but data. I knew then that if I didn't leave, I wouldn't survive. It took me 3 days to plan. I hid the bruises with makeup, pretended to forgive him, even let him strap me down again one night, though I secretly loosened the cuffs beforehand. And when the drug hit, I fought through it, forced myself upright, ripped the headset from my skull and smashed it against the floor. Cassian's face twisted, fury breaking through his calm mask for the first time. "Do you realize what you've ruined?" he screamed, lunging for me. I clawed my way free, stumbled into the hall, and ran barefoot into the night. By the time I reached a neighbor's house and called the police, Cassian was gone. His apartment stripped of equipment, his phone disconnected, the clinic he worked for claiming he had resigned weeks earlier. It was like he had erased himself completely. But I know he's still out there, because the dreams haven't stopped. Some nights I wake up paralyzed, the echo of static whispers crawling through my skull, and in the corner of the room, I see a shape standing there, tall, unmoving, watching, and I hear Cassian's voice, calm and steady, like he never left. "We'll go deeper tomorrow." Moving in with Dorian should have been exciting. We'd been dating close to a year, and on the surface, he was the kind of man people envied. He was steady, responsible, the one who showed up early to help my mom carry groceries when she threw her back out. He kept his house immaculate, cooked meals that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and never once raised his voice to me. So when he asked me to move into his place, a tidy 2-story home on the edge of St. Paul, I said yes without hesitation. I pictured us painting walls together, hosting small dinners, maybe even getting a dog. What I didn't picture was the notebook. The very first night I brought my boxes over, Dorian set it down on the kitchen table. A simple spiral-bound notebook, first page filled in blocky black handwriting. At the top, it said, "House Rules." And beneath that, 6 lines. "Be home by 8 p.m. Never leave the bedroom door open while we sleep. Don't eat unless I prepare the food. No guests without my approval. Don't ask about the locked room. Never break a rule twice." I laughed when I read it, assuming it was some kind of inside joke. Is this supposed to be cute? Like a roommate contract? Dorian didn't laugh. He just looked at me steadily and said, "No, these are important. If we're going to work, you'll need to follow them." The silence that followed was heavy, and I remember forcing myself to smile, nodding like I understood. But something in my stomach turned cold. At first, I convinced myself it was just quirks. Some people are particular, right? He'd lived alone for years. Maybe he just had habits. I tried to adjust. I rushed home from work to make sure I was inside before 8, even when traffic made me sweat bullets at every red light. I kept the bedroom door closed, even when I felt claustrophobic in the dark. I let him cook every meal, even when I craved something simple like cereal. But rules have a way of tightening around you. The first mistake I made was small. I left the bedroom door cracked one night when I got up to use the bathroom. I figured it didn't matter, I'd only be gone a minute. But when I returned, Dorian was sitting up in bed, wide awake, staring at the door. "You forgot," he said softly. I froze in the doorway. "Forgot what?" "The door." His tone was calm, but his eyes never blinked. "Don't let it happen again." He lay back down without another word, but I couldn't close my eyes the rest of the night. The second mistake happened the next morning. Rushing to work, I grabbed a granola bar from my purse instead of waiting for him to finish making breakfast. I didn't think anything of it until I got home that evening. There, sitting neatly on my pillow, was the wrapper. He never mentioned it, never scolded me. But the message was clear. He knew. After that, I started noticing other things. How he locked the front door from the outside when he left for work, sliding the bolt so I couldn't open it even with my key. How he checked my phone battery at night, as if making sure I hadn't used it after he fell asleep. How his gaze lingered whenever I ate, like he was counting each bite. It was subtle at first, enough that I could almost convince myself I was imagining it. But the tension built day after day until I felt like a guest in a house that was supposed to be mine. The worst was the night I broke Rule 1. A work project ran late, and by the time I pulled into the driveway it was 8:05. 5 minutes passed. The house was dark when I stepped inside, eerily quiet. I set my bag down carefully, listening, but heard nothing. Then I saw it. The notebook, sitting on the kitchen table, open to a new page. In the same thick handwriting, one sentence: "Never break a rule twice." I stood there for a long time, staring at it, my pulse thundering in my ears. When I finally looked up, Dorian was in the doorway watching me. He didn't say a word. He just smiled faintly, turned and walked upstairs. That was when I understood. The rules weren't requests. They were warnings. And I had already broken 3. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every breath beside me felt like it might be the last I'd take. By morning, Dorian was cheerful, humming as he made breakfast like nothing had happened. He slid a plate of eggs in front of me and asked about my day as though he hadn't left that sentence in the notebook, as though he hadn't watched me read it. I forced myself to answer casually, but my stomach twisted with every bite. From then on, the rules weren't just words on paper. They were alive, pressing down on me every second. If I was even close to breaking one, Dorian would appear, silent, watchful. Sometimes I'd turn around and find him standing in the doorway, expression blank, just waiting. The first punishment came a week later. I'd forgotten to charge my phone overnight, and when I plugged it in the next morning, he noticed. "Battery's low," he said. "What were you doing so late?" "Nothing," I insisted. "I just forgot." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. That evening, when I came home from work, the phone was gone. My charger, too. He never mentioned it again. He didn't have to. The silence of that missing phone was punishment enough. A month in, I broke Rule 3. He'd left for a meeting and I was starving. Hours ticked by, my stomach aching until finally I caved and made myself a sandwich. I ate it quickly, cleaned everything, hid the evidence. But when he came home, there it was on the counter. The knife I could have sworn I'd washed and dried. He picked it up, ran his finger along the blade, and said softly, "You know better." That night he locked the bedroom door from the outside. I spent the entire night in the dark, pounding on the wood until my fists bled, listening to his footsteps pacing in the hallway. When he opened it in the morning, he kissed my forehead. "Rules keep us safe," he whispered. "I only do this because I love you." The worst came when I broke Rule 5. I hadn't meant to. The locked room at the end of the hall had been gnawing at me for weeks. Why couldn't I go in? What was so dangerous? One night, while Dorian was out, I searched the drawers until I found the spare key taped under his desk. My hands shook as I slid it into the lock. The smell hit me first. Metallic, sour, like rust and rot. I pushed the door open, heart racing, and froze. Inside, against the far wall, were photographs. Dozens of them, taped in neat rows. Every single one was of me. Me eating breakfast, me brushing my hair, me reading on the couch. Some from angles I couldn't place, like they'd been taken through cracks in the door, or from outside the window at night. My stomach turned. On the desk beneath them sat the spiral notebook. A second one, thicker than the first, filled cover to cover with notes. My name at the top of every page, followed by times, actions, mistakes. A ledger of my life. Behind me, the door clicked shut. I spun around, and Dorian was there. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he said calmly. I backed away, my voice trembling. "What is this? Why are you—" He raised a finger to his lips. "Shh. Remember Rule 6? My blood ran cold. Never break a rule twice. He didn't scream. He didn't hit me. He just walked toward me slowly, deliberately, while I pressed myself against the wall of photographs. You think these rules are punishment?" he said softly. "But they're not. They're protection. You need order, structure. Without it, you'd fall apart. I give you that." His voice dropped, almost tender. "I give you everything." I begged him to let me go, promised I'd never tell anyone, but he just tilted his head. No, you don't understand. You're not a guest here. You're not even my girlfriend anymore." His eyes burned into mine. "You're my work." That's when I saw it, the small camera light blinking red in the corner of the ceiling. He hadn't just been watching me in person. He'd been recording, cataloging, studying every second of my life in that house. I shoved past him, bolting for the door, but he was faster. His hand closed around my wrist, iron strong. For the first time since I'd met him, the mask slipped. His calm voice broke into a low growl. "You don't leave." I twisted, fought, screamed, but he dragged me back toward the center of the room, toward that notebook filled with my life. My vision blurred with tears, and in that moment I knew he'd never let me go. I don't remember how I got out. Panic must have given me strength. I woke up hours later in the ER, bruised, dehydrated, but alive. I told the police everything. They went to the house. It was empty. The notebooks, the photos, even the furniture, gone, like the house had never been lived in. They told me there wasn't enough evidence to pursue. No one by Dorian's name owned that house. No one by his description had ever worked where he said he did. And yet sometimes in the middle of the night I wake to find a piece of paper slipped under my door. Always the same words. Never break a rule twice. When I ended things with Silas, I thought it would finally feel like breathing again. We'd been together for 2 years, and while he was never openly violent, he had this way of tightening around me until there was no space left. Every text demanded an immediate reply. Every outing required an explanation. Even when we were apart, I felt like he was always watching. When I finally broke it off, his reaction wasn't what I expected. No shouting, no begging, just this long, unnerving stare. Then he leaned close and whispered, "You'll regret this." I told myself it was just anger, empty words from a man who didn't like losing control. That was 6 months ago. At first it was just little things. A car idling too long on my street. My phone buzzing with no caller ID at odd hours. A coworker mentioning they thought they'd seen me at the grocery store when I hadn't gone. I brushed it off, told myself I was paranoid. But deep down I knew. Silas wasn't gone. The first undeniable sign came one evening in May. I came home from work, tossed my bag on the couch, and went into the bathroom to wash up. When I looked in the mirror, my stomach dropped. There were words traced faintly across the glass like someone had written with their finger in steam. Still mine. I hadn't showered. The mirror wasn't fogged. My hands shook as I ran a towel over it, trying to convince myself maybe it was residue from weeks ago. But later that night, when I brushed my teeth, the words were back. Clearer this time. I hardly slept. The next morning, my neighbor texted me. "Hey, thought you should see this." Weird. Attached was a photo from her porch security cam. It showed my driveway at 2:47 a.m. My car was parked where I left it, and just behind it, at the edge of the frame, was a tall figure in a hoodie. He wasn't walking or moving, just standing, facing my house. My throat tightened. Even though the hood shadowed his face, I knew it was Silas. I called the police, hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. They sent a cruiser by, took a report, but without clear proof there wasn't much they could do. The officer asked if Silas had ever physically harmed me. When I said no, he sighed, told me to stay vigilant, and left it at that. That night I locked every window, every door. I even dragged a chair under the front door handle just in case. Still, sleep wouldn't come. I kept staring at the ceiling, heart hammering at every creak of the house. Around 4 a.m., I heard it. The sound of a door hinge groaning somewhere in the apartment. I froze, barely breathing, straining my ears. Then, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. My pulse thundered as I sat up, reaching for my phone. The sound wasn't in the hallway. It was closer. The closet. I gripped my phone like a weapon, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the crack between the closet doors. The light cut across coats and shadows. Empty. My knees went weak with relief, and I almost laughed at myself. Then I saw it. On the floor, just past the threshold, was a footprint. Wet, bare, fresh. And it wasn't mine. The next day at work, I tried to focus, but everything felt wrong. My coworkers noticed. One asked if I was okay. Another teased me for jumping at shadows. I wanted to tell them everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Because how could I explain the way I woke up to find my kitchen chair moved an inch from where I'd left it? Or how my alarm clock reset itself to 2:47 a.m., the same time the camera had caught that figure outside. By the time I got home that night, the dread was suffocating. I made myself tea, turned on every light, and tried to read on the couch. For a while, it worked. The house felt normal again. Safe. Until I went to bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of cars on the street. My eyelids grew heavy, and just as I drifted off, I heard it. A voice. Faint. Low. Whispering from the dark corner of the room. It said my name. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. The room was empty. My eyes darted to the closet, still shut, the window unlocked. But when I turned back to the nightstand, my stomach dropped. The spiral notebook I kept for work was open. A page I hadn't written on was filled with heavy, jagged handwriting. "You'll regret this." I barely remember sleeping after finding that message in my notebook. I sat awake until the sun came up, every light in the house burning, my hands trembling too badly to even hold my phone. By the time morning arrived, I convinced myself it had to be a prank. Maybe I'd left the door unlocked, maybe someone had broken in just to scare me. The alternative, that Silas had gotten in without a trace, was too terrifying to accept. I called the police again. Same officer, same tired sigh. "If he didn't hurt you, there's not much we can do without proof," he told me. He suggested a restraining order, but warned me it was a paper shield. His words rattled around in my head all day. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a coworker's place, too embarrassed to admit the real reason. I told her my heat was out, and she let me crash on the couch. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. When I came home the next morning, though, something was wrong. My front door was locked from the inside. I had to use my spare key hidden in the planter to get in, and on my kitchen table, there was a mug of coffee, still steaming. I dropped my bag and ran out. I didn't even call anyone that time. I just drove. For the next week, I stayed with friends, bouncing from couch to couch, but the stalking didn't stop. Each place I stayed, I'd find something off. At one apartment, the bathroom mirror fogged even though no one had showered, words faintly traced into the condensation. Mine. At another, my friend's cat hissed at the corner of the room all night, eyes locked on empty air. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. The breaking point came when I finally went back to my own place to grab more clothes. I thought if I was quick, if I went in daylight, I'd be safe. I stepped into my bedroom, pulled open my dresser, and froze. Every single drawer was empty. My clothes, my socks, my jewelry, all gone. But the closet wasn't empty. Inside, hanging from the rod where my dresses should have been, was one outfit. The same one I'd worn on my first date with Silas. Folded on the shelf beneath it were the shoes I'd worn that night, and taped to the wall was a photo of me from across the restaurant table, laughing. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. Put it on. My vision blurred with panic. I dropped the phone and ran. That night I checked into a motel. Crappy fluorescent lights buzzing, peeling wallpaper, but at least it wasn't my house. I double-locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, and tried to convince myself I was safe. At 2:47 a.m., that cursed time again, I woke to the sound of the chair sliding across the floor. The door never opened. But when I turned toward the window, my breath caught. Silas was standing outside, not moving, not knocking, just staring in. I scrambled for my phone, snapped a photo. But when the flash went off, the window reflected nothing. No Silas. Just me. I sat frozen, staring at the empty glass when I felt it. A cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around. The room was empty. But my notebook, the one I had left in my car, was sitting on the bed. Pages fluttering, and across one of them, written in jagged strokes that pressed through the paper, were 3 words: I never left. The police searched my house again after I finally showed them the photo and explained everything. But they found nothing. No Silas, no clothes, no photos. Even the coffee mug was gone. My friends begged me to move, and I did. New apartment, new locks, new phone number. But it didn't matter, because sometimes in the dead hours of the night, I'll see words appear on my bathroom mirror. Not in steam, not faint. Carved deep into the glass itself. Still mine. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I swear I feel the mattress dip, like someone's lying down beside me. Breathing. Waiting. I met Rowan at a time when I was raw and vulnerable, the kind of lonely that makes you ignore red flags just to feel wanted. I'd just gotten out of a 3-year relationship that had ended badly, and I was drifting. My friends were busy with their own lives. My family lived states away, and I was working double shifts at a diner just to make rent on a cramped apartment I hated coming back to. Rowan didn't feel like just a man. He felt like a rescue. He showed up one night at the diner with this easy smile, said I looked like I needed a real meal, not the greasy food we served. He left me his number on a napkin with a single line. You deserve more. I should have laughed. I should have thrown it away. But I didn't. Within weeks, we were inseparable. He remembered everything I told him, the books I loved, the way I took my coffee, even the fact that I hated the sound of ticking clocks. He seemed almost too perfect, but I told myself it was what I deserved after so much disappointment. After 4 months, he asked me to move in with him. His house, he said, was too big for one person. I hesitated, but the way he held me and whispered, "You'll never have to struggle again," tipped the scales. I moved in 2 weeks later. The house was quiet. Too quiet. A 2-story place outside Des Moines, surrounded by endless fields. No sidewalks, no neighbors close enough to wave to. At first I thought it was peaceful. The first night I slept there, Rowan made dinner by candlelight, poured wine, told me, "This is where life really starts for us." But soon, the quiet turned from soothing to suffocating. The first odd thing I noticed was my phone. I left it charging on the nightstand, and one morning it was gone. When I asked Rowan, he smiled gently. "You don't need that anymore," he said. "No one out there really cared about you the way I do. This is home now." I laughed, but he didn't. He just kissed my forehead like I was a child who didn't understand. Then it was my purse. Vanished. Then my work uniforms. When I asked where they were, he told me he had taken care of them. He said I didn't need to worry about bills or rent or bosses ever again. I wanted to argue, but he looked so calm, so certain, that the words tangled in my throat. Days bled together. Rowan insisted on cooking all the meals. He woke up before me, laid out my clothes, told me when to shower, when to rest. I stopped keeping track of time because the house didn't seem to have clocks. No ticking, no reminders. When I asked if I could go into town just to shop or stretch my legs, he smiled, stroked my hair, and said, "The world out there doesn't need you anymore, but I do." The more I thought about it, the stranger it became. I hadn't seen a single car pass on the road since I moved in. No mail came, no knocks at the door. The silence outside was total, broken only by the wind across the fields. At night, it pressed against me like a weight. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, straining for any sound, and a plane overhead, a dog barking in the distance but there was nothing. Just silence so deep it made my ears ring. One evening I tried the front door. I told myself it was just to get fresh air, to feel the outside breeze. The knob wouldn't turn. Locked. I went to Rowan, trying to sound casual. "Hey, do you have a spare key for the door? I wanted to step out for a bit." He looked at me for a long time, then smiled softly, almost pitying. "There's no reason to go out there," he said. "Everything you need is here." I laughed nervously. "Rowan, that's not normal. I just want to..." He pressed a finger to my lips. "Shh. You're safe here. That's all that matters." Something in the way he said it made me go quiet. Weeks passed. I stopped trying to argue. I told myself maybe this was what love looked like. Safety, predictability, someone who wanted me all to himself. But in the quiet, my thoughts grew darker. I caught myself wondering if the world outside the house even existed anymore. It all came to a head one night when I woke suddenly, not to silence, but to a sound I hadn't heard in months. A voice. Faint. Broken. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. I froze, heart pounding. The voice was hoarse, muffled, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice. She was crying, and she was begging for help. At first I thought I was dreaming, my brain trying to fill the endless silence with anything, even horror. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. It was real. A woman's voice, muffled and raw, rising from beneath the floorboards. "Please. Please." My whole body shook. I slid out of bed, careful not to wake Rowan, and pressed my ear to the hardwood. The crying was faint but steady, like someone far below was clawing their way up through the earth itself. I whispered, "Hello? Who's down there?" The crying stopped. Silence swallowed the house again. And then I heard it. 3 slow knocks from directly beneath the floor. The next morning, I couldn't stop staring at Rowan. He hummed while he made breakfast, kissed the top of my head like nothing was wrong. I wanted to ask him about the voice, but the words caught in my throat. Finally I blurted, "What's in the basement?" Rowan froze, just for a second. Then he turned, smiled perfectly calm, and said, "Storage. Why do you ask?" I lied. "Just curious." He carried the plates to the table, set one in front of me, and leaned close. "Don't go down there," he whispered. "Promise me." That night, after Rowan fell asleep, I crept downstairs. The basement door was locked with a heavy chain, padlock gleaming in the moonlight. I tugged, but it didn't budge. Still, when I pressed my ear against the door, I swore I heard it again. Faint scratching like fingernails dragging against wood. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and nearly screamed when Rowan's voice cut through the dark behind me. "What are you doing?" He was standing on the stairs, watching. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. I thought I heard something," I stammered. Rowan walked toward me slowly, deliberately. "You promised not to go down there." "I never promised." He pressed a finger to my lips, the same way he always did when I pushed too hard. "Shh. You'll understand one day. The silence protects us." I wanted to scream, to shove him aside and run, but the tenderness in his voice was more terrifying than rage. Days blurred together again. Rowan tightened his control. The windows already shut were now nailed closed. He started locking the bedroom door from the outside when he left. I tried to stay calm, to act obedient, but my mind kept circling back to that voice. Who was she? Why was she beneath this house? And why did Rowan need the silence so badly? The breaking point came a week later. Rowan left for supplies, and I finally worked up the courage to search. I tore through every drawer, every shelf, until I found a small ring of keys tucked inside one of his shoes in the closet. My hands shook as I fit one into the basement lock. The door groaned open. Cold air rushed up, carrying with it the stench of rot and mildew. I descended slowly, the old wooden stairs creaking under my weight. The basement was dim, lit only by a single hanging bulb. At first, I saw nothing but boxes and old furniture. And then my eyes adjusted. Along the far wall were cages, rusted, filthy, the kind used for animals. And inside the largest one was a woman. Her hair hung in greasy strands, her skin pale and bruised. She crawled toward me on shaking hands, whispering, "Help, please." I staggered back, choking on a scream. That's when I felt a hand clamp down on my shoulder. Rowan. He yanked me around, his face inches from mine, the mask of calm gone. His eyes were wild, desperate. "Why didn't you listen?" he hissed. I tried to break free, pointing toward the cage. "Rowan, what the hell is this? Who is she?" His expression shifted, almost tender again. "She was like you, lost, lonely." I gave her peace, but she broke the silence. His grip tightened until I thought my bones would snap. "I can't let you do the same." The woman in the cage sobbed, rattling the bars. "Run," she begged. I shoved Rowan with every ounce of strength I had, sending him crashing into a stack of boxes. I grabbed the keys and fumbled with the lock on the cage, my hands slippery with sweat. Rowan roared behind me, scrambling to his feet. I turned the key, the lock clicked, and the woman pushed the door open just as Rowan lunged. We ran. Up the stairs, through the kitchen, slamming against the front door until it gave. The last thing I heard as we fled into the night was Rowan's voice, calm again, echoing from the house. "The silence will bring you back." The woman and I collapsed on the road, sobbing, clinging to each other. But when I turned to thank her, to ask who she was gone, vanished. All that remained was a damp patch on the pavement where her tears had fallen. The police searched the house. No cages, no woman, no Rowan. The basement was empty, clean, as though no one had ever lived there. I moved states away, tried to start over, but the silence followed me. Sometimes when I wake in the dead of night, the world around me is so utterly quiet it feels wrong. No hum of the fridge, no ticking of pipes, not even my own breath. And in that silence I hear it again, the woman's voice. "Please, please." I woke up one night to the sound of chewing. Not the soft kind you hear when someone sneaks a snack. This was wet, grinding animal chewing. Every bite was followed by a snap, a crack, and a long, slow swallow. When my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw my boyfriend, Lysander, crouched low on the floor beside the bed. His back was hunched, shoulders trembling, his head tilted downward as his jaw worked steadily. At first I thought maybe he'd grabbed something from the fridge, but then I saw the glint of light. In his hand, pressed tight between his fingers, was my missing phone. The screen was split, casing shattered, plastic bent in on itself. He was chewing through it. My throat closed and I whispered his name. He stopped mid-bite, head snapping toward me far too fast, like his neck had no bones. In the thin glow of the street lamp outside, I saw his smile. His teeth weren't his teeth anymore. Too many. Too sharp. He swallowed a jagged piece of glass like it was candy, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and whispered, "Not everything I eat is meant for me." He climbed into bed like nothing happened, curling his freezing arms around me. I didn't sleep another second that night. The truth is, I should have seen it coming. Weeks earlier, Things had already started to feel off. We were eating dinner, spaghetti and wine. I dropped my fork, bent down to grab it, and for just a second, I noticed something impossible. Lysander's feet weren't there. The chair was pulled out, his body sitting upright, but from the knees down, nothing. Just air. I blinked, and his legs were back again. He smiled, asked if I was okay, and I laughed it off. Told myself I was tired. But after that night, the glimpses became harder to ignore. He started losing time. I'd ask him a question, and he'd stare at me blankly like he didn't know who I was. Then, a beat later, he'd snap back into himself, smiling like nothing had happened. Sometimes I'd catch him watching the corner of the room with this hollow look in his eyes, lips moving silently. When I asked what he was saying, he'd reply, "Just listening." Listening to what? He never told me. At night, the sleepwalking began. I'd wake to the sound of floorboards creaking and find him standing in the kitchen in complete darkness. His head tilted back, mouth open, lips moving. Sometimes his hands twitched like he was holding something invisible and passing it back and forth. The first time I asked what he was doing, he didn't even look at me. His voice came out low, almost guttural. "It's hungry." When I pressed him about it in the morning, he laughed like I was crazy, swore he didn't remember a thing. Then came the whispers. I thought he was talking in his sleep, but the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't just him. There were two voices. One was his, calm, steady, almost sweet. The other was deeper, distorted, like it was being dragged through static. Sometimes they overlapped. Other times they spoke in unison. Once I pressed my ear to his chest while he slept. What I heard wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't even breathing. It was whispering. Something inside him was whispering through his ribs. The apartment itself started to feel wrong after that. I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror lagging behind, a fraction late to mimic my movements. The lights flickered when I entered a room, even after the bulbs were replaced. Objects weren't where I left them. A mug turned slightly. A chair angled differently. His shadow falling the wrong way when he walked past a lamp. And Lysander. Lysander was changing. His smile stretched too wide. His laugh had an echo like it came from somewhere far away. His skin sometimes looked thin, like parchment pulled too tight, shifting as though something beneath it was pressing to come out. The night before everything collapsed, I found something on the floor near his side of the bed. At first I thought it was a piece of eggshell, curved and brittle. But when I held it up to the light, I realized it wasn't shell. It was enamel, like a fragment of a tooth. Only it was hollow, like it had grown inside out. When I showed it to Lysander, he didn't even look. He just said softly, "Don't worry, it's not yours." That was when the fear really took hold. Not just of him, but of myself. Because every time I tried to convince myself to leave, something stopped me. My keys bent when I picked them up, curling like soft metal. The doorknob burned my skin when I tried to turn it. When I smashed the window with a lamp, the glass dissolved into dust before it hit the ground. The apartment wasn't just where we lived anymore. It was part of him, and I was trapped inside it. The last night of part 1 ended the same way it began, with chewing. I woke again to those same grinding, wet sounds. Lysander was sitting on the edge of the bed this time, back hunched, hands working at something in his lap. I whispered his name, voice shaking. Slowly, he turned. His smile was too wide, blood smeared along his teeth. In his hands was a bird, or what was left of one. Bones cracked as he bit through its wing. Feathers stuck to his chin. And when he swallowed, I heard the other voice inside him whisper, "She's next." I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The sound of teeth grinding through bone, the wet swallow, the whisper that wasn't his. When dawn finally broke, Lysander was gone. The sheets were cold, his side of the bed empty. For a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined all of it. Maybe stress had twisted my mind into monsters. But then I saw what he left behind. On the nightstand, laid neatly like an offering, was the bird's skull. Hollow. Picked clean. That day dragged on in silence. The apartment seemed darker somehow, the air heavier. I kept checking the windows, the locks, pacing from room to room, desperate for a way out. I even tried prying the floorboards loose, but the wood wouldn't give. My hands blistered from pulling, but the boards held like stone. By evening, I started to hear it again. Whispers. Not just from him this time. From the walls, the floor, the ceiling. My name, spoken over and over, in his voice and the other, until I wanted to rip my ears off. When Lysander came home, he looked different. Taller somehow, his shoulders stretching the seams of his shirt. His skin was pale and almost translucent, veins black beneath the surface. He set down a paper bag, looked at me with that too wide smile and said, "I brought dinner." When I peeked inside, I gagged. It wasn't food, not anything human would eat, just hunks of meat, black, slimy, reeking of earth and rot. "Eat," he whispered, pushing the bag toward me. I shook my head, heart pounding. "What is this?" His smile never wavered. Part of me. Part of us. That night, I tried again to run. I sprinted to the front door, slammed against it, pulled with every ounce of strength I had. The knob turned, but behind it wasn't the hallway. It was him. A reflection of Lysander, grinning in the dark beyond the door frame. His lips moved in sync with the voice I'd heard whispering at night. "Not everything I eat is meant for me." I stumbled back, screaming, and the door slammed shut on its own. The final transformation came 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of tearing fabric. Lysander stood over me, his shirt split open, his chest gaping wide. But there were no organs inside. No heart, no lungs, nothing human. Just a hollow cavity filled with black shapes writhing and stretching, their surfaces slick and glistening like tar. From deep inside him came dozens of voices, all whispering in unison. "She fits. She fits. She fits." He leaned closer, his face inches from mine, his teeth jagged and bloodied. "I've been making room for you," he whispered. Before I could move, cold hands slipped out of him. Dozens of them. They wrapped around my wrists, my ankles, my throat. Wet fingers dragged across my skin, leaving trails that burned like acid. I fought, kicked, screamed, but they were endless. They pulled at me, tugging me toward the hollow space inside his chest. The smell was unbearable. Rust, decay, the sharp tang of something not from this world. I swear I felt myself starting to go under, felt the first pull of my ribs stretching apart. And then, silence. I don't remember how it stopped. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe I was spared. When I woke, I was alone in the bed. Lysander was gone. The apartment was still. But something is wrong with me now. I feel it when I breathe, my chest too light, too hollow. Sometimes when I press my hand to my sternum, I swear I feel something shift beneath my skin, something pressing back. At night when the lights are out, I hear whispers rising from inside my ribs. 2 voices speaking together. One of them is mine. And sometimes, in the corner of the room, I see him, Lysander, watching, smiling, waiting for me to join him.